This looks like a video game glitch. Thousands of identical buildings stretching forever. These communist megacities housed millions of people, but there's something hidden between these concrete blocks that nobody talks about. Something so clever that today's most expensive cities are desperately trying to copy it, but they're missing the point completely. So why do these cities all look exactly the same? What's really hidden between these buildings? And why did a system that housed millions perfectly suddenly collapse overnight? Every big city has the same problem. Where do you put everyone? In New York, a tiny apartment costs $3,000 a month. In San Francisco, teachers sleep in their cars because they can't afford rent anywhere. In London, doctors in their 30s still live with roommates. But in the 1950s, communist countries claimed they had solved this forever. Look at these cities again. At first glance, they look like concrete prisons. But there's a reason every single building looks identical. There's a reason they're spaced exactly the way they are. And there's a reason millions of people lived in these places happily for decades. The first clue is in the spacing. These aren't randomly placed buildings. Look closer at what's between them. You'll notice paths, but they don't lead to roads. They lead somewhere else entirely. Somewhere that changes everything about how these cities work. But before we reveal what's hidden here, you need to understand what these places replaced. Because the communist solution wasn't just different, it was the exact opposite of everything the West was building. This is Sofia, the capital of Bulgaria. From the street level, it looks like every stereotype you've heard about Eastern Europe. Gray, concrete, depressing. But watch what happens when you move between these buildings. Suddenly, you're in a secret world. This is what they hid between the concrete blocks. Not parking lots, not empty space. Entire neighborhoods designed around something the West had completely forgotten. Community. They're part of something called a microdistrict. Every building placement was calculated with scientific precision. Look at this incredible detail. They positioned each building at exact angles to trap heat from the sun in winter without getting too hot in summer. The planners calculated the precise orientation so apartments would stay warm when it's freezing, but cool when it's blazing hot. They also placed buildings strategically to block highway noise from reaching the playgrounds and parks. Even the spacing between buildings was engineered. Wide enough for emergency vehicles and natural airflow, but narrow enough to create protected community courtyards. They literally designed wind corridors to naturally cool the neighborhoods without air conditioning. But here's what nobody expected. Between these uniform buildings, they built paradise. Schools tucked behind trees where kids could walk safely. Playgrounds that feel like secret forests. Grocery stores connected by green walking paths. It's like they designed the whole neighborhood as one giant park with apartments scattered through it. Here's a number that will destroy everything you think you know about housing. Sofia housed more people per square kilometer than Manhattan, and everyone could afford to live there. These neighborhoods had lower crime rates than most American suburbs. One Bulgarian microdistrict housed 15,000 people in the space of a typical shopping mall, but kids could walk to school safely every day. Every detail was planned around human scale. Kids' school exactly 200 meters away because small children can't walk far. High school at 500 meters. Clinics within 400 meters. Grocery stores every 300 meters. The distance you can comfortably walk carrying heavy shopping bags. These green corridors stretch for miles, connecting entire neighborhoods through walking paths. Kids play between apartment buildings. Even today, residents maintain these areas themselves, not because anyone forces them, but because they genuinely care about these spaces. While America was building suburbs where you need a car for everything, communist cities accidentally created something incredible. But there's something nobody tells you about these cities. They had an expiration date built right in, not in the buildings, in the people. The system only worked if every single person wanted exactly the same life. The moment anyone wanted something different, everything fell apart. Here's where the cracks started showing. When you build millions of apartments using identical designs, you save money. But you also create cities where people get lost in their own neighborhoods. Imagine giving directions when every building looks exactly the same. The buildings themselves weren't built to last. Walls cracked after just a few years. Elevators broke constantly. Heating systems failed every winter. The government focused on housing everyone quickly, not housing everyone well. But the deepest flaw was control. The government decided where you lived, who your neighbors were, even what color you could paint your walls. Everything was decided for you. The beautiful community spaces came with a price, your freedom to choose. By the 1970s, the system was breaking down. The government couldn't afford to maintain these massive neighborhoods. They forced residents to volunteer on weekends, to clean and repair everything themselves. When people don't choose to help, the work doesn't get done well. And then came the collapse that nobody saw coming. In Bulgaria, when communism ended, the government tried to return land to original owners. But most of Sofia had been built on old farmland. The only land they could return was the parks, those beautiful green spaces between buildings. During Bulgaria's economic crisis, inflation hit 2,000%. People were desperate to sell their newly acquired parkland. The only buyers with money were wealthy developers. So piece by piece, the green heart of these cities was sold off and turned into parking lots and luxury buildings. Imagine waking up and discovering your neighborhood park is now a gated compound you can't enter. Half of Sofia's green space disappeared this way. Here's the part that will blow your mind. Today, the world's most expensive cities are desperately trying to recreate what these communist cities had. Paris is spending billions on their 15-minute city plan. Barcelona is redesigning entire neighborhoods around walkability. Vancouver is building mixed-use communities with everything within walking distance. They're copying every single design element from these communist blocks, but they're missing the point completely. What planners who lived in these cities remember isn't the architecture. One woman described it. "I knew every neighbor. My kids played in the park every day. I never worried about them." But others remember it differently. It felt like a prison. Same gray building everywhere. You couldn't make anything your own. This is what will surprise you. Look at this development in Brooklyn called Via Verde. They're charging $3,000 a month for apartments that copy the exact layout of Soviet housing blocks. In Singapore, they're building community courtyards and marketing them as luxury innovations. These are the same green spaces between buildings that were free for millions of people. But here's the sick irony. In Prague, communist-era apartments now sell for over $1 million, the same units that housed entire families for free. Developers gut the interiors, paint them white, and call them brutalist chic. They keep the community spaces but gate them off for residents only. And here's something beautiful that's happening now. Some people still maintain these spaces themselves, not because the government forces them, but because they choose to. In Sofia, elderly residents sweep fallen leaves with tree branches they snap off themselves. Nobody else will do it. "So I do," one woman explained. That's completely different from the old system. Back then, the government forced people to work on Lenin's Saturdays to clean neighborhoods. Now it's voluntary, and that makes all the difference. But there's a darker side to how these places are seen today. Some abandoned communist cities have become Instagram tourist attractions. People take selfies in empty playgrounds and crumbling community centers. The places designed to house the future became backdrops for social media posts. Even worse, luxury developers now market communist-inspired apartments to wealthy buyers. They copy the architecture, but strip away everything that made these places work. The affordability, the community spaces, the walkability. They take the aesthetic and sell it back to rich people as lifestyle branding. Here's what keeps me awake at night. Right now, while you're watching this, teachers in major cities are choosing between rent and food. Families are being forced out of neighborhoods they've lived in for generations. We're facing the biggest housing crisis in modern history. Meanwhile, developers are taking the solutions that housed millions of people for free and selling them back to us as luxury products. These communist cities prove something crucial. We know how to build affordable, walkable, community-centered neighborhoods. The blueprints exist. The engineering works. We've had the technology for 70 years. The question isn't whether we can solve the housing crisis. The question is whether we're willing to choose community over profit. Because every day we don't act, more teachers sleep in cars, more families get priced out, more communities get destroyed. What will you do with this knowledge? Will you demand better from your city? Will you vote for leaders who understand that housing is a right, not just a commodity? Because the solutions aren't hidden. They're right there in those concrete blocks everyone calls ugly. We just have to be brave enough to copy the parts that worked. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you want to see more hidden solutions to the problems destroying our world. The answers are out there. We just have to choose to use them.